talked a lot about Dead by Daylight, the interactions that I have, the killers that I play, the patterns that I notice, but I've yet to take a step back and look at the fundamentals and the mechanics of the game, and how they created trials that allow for genuine connections between humans. There are a couple factors that I'm going to elaborate on, but here's a general idea. The length of the trials, the killers can't instantly kill survivors, the variety of maps, the lack of available communication, the unchanged gameplay loop, the survivor objective, and last but certainly not least, the free will that players have in the trials. I'm here to share my experiences, thoughts, and observations that I've made in my thousands of hours. I am not telling you what your DBD experience should or shouldn't be, as we all have our unique perspectives. With that out of the way, the average trial is 7 to 15 minutes long. There are certain outliers where generators fly and the survivors immediately get out, or you get tunneled out immediately, or someone holds a 3-gen for 45 minutes. But generally, 7 to 15 minutes. Interestingly enough, that is a perfect amount of time to get invested into a game, but it's not so long that if you lose, you've lost a significant amount of your day. If the game was too short, you wouldn't be able to get to know your teammates or the killer. And yes, you do get to know the people you play with or against. Not in the same way as if you were having a conversation with them, but you see their strategies, you see their choices, you see their mind games. You can often tell their experience level, the way that they play the game based on their perks, and the way that they respond to mistakes or difficult situations. All of these are ways to learn about someone. Here, let's focus entirely on interactions with this Fang in this Twins game. She continued to do the gen even after her teammate got injured. When her teammate was down, she was sticking nearby for a pallet or flashlight save. She didn't run away when she saw that I noticed her. She missed the pallet save and looked visibly disappointed. She accepted dying for her mistake. She healed in the basement, twice. She refused to let me kill her teammates and expressed disapproval when I hit them. Me and this Fang haven't exchanged any words. But I can tell she's not an entirely new player, she's open to silly interactions, she's running a medkit and healing in the basement, which shows that she's not comfortable staying injured, she's altruistic and doesn't disconnect when she makes mistakes, and she doesn't betray her teammates even when she's formed a bond with the killer. These are all observations and conclusions that I made. We learned about each other and we connected. If the game was too long, we'd get bored of each other, or not even want to be silly, because then the game would just extend even longer. But the trials are set up to be a perfect length. Long enough so we can get to know each other, but not so long that silly interactions become a time commitment to be considered rather than a spur-of-the-moment thing that happens. The length of the trials gives us enough time to connect as humans. Before you comment, yes, I know Tombstone Myers exists. That's actually a big reason why I don't like him very much. But what actually inspired this point was the asymmetrical horror game Texas Chainsaw Massacre. A pretty flawed game, but I liked the idea of having multiple killers, and I love Bubba Sawyer. A big problem I had in the game was that victims and the family had little to no leeway when it came to non-objective related interactions. Because the family members could instantly execute the victims, you were forced to play it safe, and there were very few dynamic or silly moments. Now, in Dead by Daylight, killers are limited by a hook system, and I think that is a good thing. If a survivor does something reckless or tries to interact with the killer, they aren't harshly punished. They still have another 2 lives. The worst thing that can happen from me nodding at a killer before the chase starts is getting injured or downed a little bit faster. So I go for it. I take those risks, and it has often led to a lot of silly bonding moments with killers, as well as a lot of survivors trusting me to not instantly kill them. The killers are still meant to be stronger than the survivors, but not to an overwhelming extent. And that is the perfect threat level for human connection. The only 2 in-game forms of communication that the developers gave the players of Dead by Daylight are And this system has often been criticized as there are plenty of moments where survivors can't communicate with each other and it leads to critical mistakes being made. But it also gave the job of creating a method of communication entirely to the player base. We are able to communicate with each other because we created a language made of crouches, points, waves, swings, and head movements. These aren't precise messages, but we can communicate approving or disapproving. We can get killers or survivors to follow us or stay somewhere. We can express surprise, confusion, or desperation. We can negotiate deals, ask for help, pay respects. For how little we were given to work with, we made the most of it, and that made it a very personal language. It's really meaningful when you're able to communicate something that the other player only understands because they also took the time to learn this language. You can't have moments like these with bots. The humanity is what makes it special. And so the player-made language creates opportunities for human connection. There are certain props or items in maps that allow survivors and killers to stop playing, basically, advanced tag. What inspired this point was a game on Dead Dog where a David was looping me around the bar, and I realized that we were in the perfect setup for him to pretend to be a bartender. And he played along! We stopped being opponents for just a second, and we were able to enjoy a silly moment where a pair of 17th century French conjoined twins are getting a drink from a gay British man. That is so ridiculous and charming. And what's even better is we were able to continue chasing after this interaction. We had that moment of connection, and then we went back to being opponents. But that doesn't erase what happened, because it was still something we both shared and took away from that trial. There are bars to bartend, TVs to watch, a movie theater to enjoy, sunsets and stars to admire. All of these beautiful spaces and realms, and sometimes it's nice to take a break from the repetitiveness of the trials and just enjoy something beautiful with another human being. And so the maps create a space for human connection. Since the beginning of the game, the trials have always been 1 killer versus 4 survivors, 5 generators to complete, and 12 hook states to gather. There hasn't been a fundamental change to the core game. And I know that this has led to people getting bored or finding the game tedious and repetitive. Those experiences are valid, but I do think that an unchanged gameplay loop has allowed the uniqueness to come from the players. You're never going to be in the middle of a trial and suddenly have a stamina bar, or have a killer throw a pallet at you. If the next killer's power is that, I'm gonna be so fucking mad. So the surprises come in the form of survivors showing up next to you out of nowhere, or face camping a bot, or staring at a plant with a killer. These moments stand out and make the game special, and I don't think they would be possible if the game changed drastically over the years. And so the unchanged gameplay loop allows for human connection. Generators are boring. That's not a hot take, but I do think that their repetitiveness is an incentive for the survivors to go seek out the killer. The most interesting parts of the game are the chases and interactions between survivors and killers. If a killer spends all game protecting generators and doesn't go for interesting chases, then all of the games will feel the same. I need the thrill of mind-gaming a smart survivor, or the adrenaline of being able to dodge or read a killer correctly. And by encouraging chase, the game also encourages connection. Even if you aren't enjoying chasing a survivor, that means that they've made an impression on you. I think the worst thing that you can feel about a killer or survivor is indifference, because that means that they did nothing to change your base opinion of them. They were just in the vicinity of you, and then the game ended. So I try my best to be a reactive and personable killer because I want to make an impression on the survivors, good or bad. Back on topic though. Generators are uninteresting, and people are interesting, and so the survivor objective leads to human connection. There is nothing in the game that will yell at you if you don't kill a survivor or don't do a generator. Your teammates might yell at you, but those are the consequences of your actions, not the mechanics of the game. You're essentially put into a trial with 4 other people with a general idea of what you should be doing, but nothing necessarily forcing you or railroading you into doing that. This gives players free will to play how they like. Killers and survivors can play competitively and focus entirely on their objective. A survivor team can collect a big pile of items and present them as an offering to the killer. A Bubba can hang out in the basement all game, guarding the chest. You have the ability to try as hard or as little as you like to progress the objective. And this is particularly true on the killer side. On the survivor side, there is pressure to be efficient or altruistic coming from your teammates. But that isn't a game mechanic, it's just a product of humans being around each other and working towards a common goal. The freedom that everyone has is the foundation of how connections are able to form in the first place. We're used to killers and survivors playing how their role is meant to be played because that is the expectation in the game. But people are unpredictable and weird and scary and wonderful. You will have awful games where you have no control over the situation. You will have frustrating games where survivors disconnect or you don't understand what's going on. And you will have amazing games where you have good chases or get a really good use out of your killer power or perks or have a funny interaction with the killer or survivor. The only constant in these trials is the fact that things won't go as you expect, and I think that's a great quality to have. The free will that players have in these games allows for human connection. Before we move on to the conclusion, I want to thank my awesome Ko-Fi people. Thank you guys. If you want to support the channel, it's at the top link in the description. I think Dead by Daylight was always meant to be an asymmetrical horror game. I think this game was meant to be fun for both sides. I do not think that the developers planned for the sheer amount of genuine connections that are made in these trials, but they made the choices that led to a place that I think is optimized for human connection, especially if you're open to being connected with. I just wanted to talk about all these neat things that happen to create a space for